Hey folks, welcome to the second ever episode of the Tune Up here on Passion for Sound. If you watched the first episode of the Tune Up, this one's going to be a little bit different. Being a new series, I'm still trying to find my way to make it the most interesting and enjoyable format that I can. And you'll see that this time around, instead of doing just one album that I really enjoy, what I've done is I've tried to find two albums, one of which is a brand new release, something that you might not have heard of before. Maybe it's a new album from an artist you like and know, but either way, I'm going to share my thoughts on a brand new album each time, and also one that I've come across that I just really enjoy, regardless of its age. And so please let me know in the comments down below if you think this is a step forward from the last one, or maybe a step backwards even. Before I jump into the albums for this episode, I just want to say a huge thanks to channel sponsor Linsol for making this video possible. The Tune Up series of videos are directly sponsored by Linsol, and it's part of why I've been able to branch out and try something new and different. And so thanks to Linsol. If you're not familiar with them, they're an online retailer. And there's a link in the description down below if you want to say thank you to them for helping to make this possible, or you just want to check out some new gear potentially, then use the link down below, maybe even put it in your browser, and next time you're looking to buy, you can buy from Linsol and say thank you to them. It is an affiliate link, so you're also helping to support the channel and more videos just like this one. So thanks to all of you that use it, and thanks to Linsol for making these videos possible. But for now, let's get into the two albums for this month's tune-up. The first album I'm going to talk about is the new release. So this is a brand new 2023 album. I think it was released in February, maybe January 2023, and it's A Reckoning by Kimbra. Kimbra's a New Zealand-born artist that's known for doing things that are a little bit different, and this album is no exception. Not only is it different to some of her previous work, but it's also a very unique album on its own. This one was produced by Kimbra, but it's got lots of different collaborators, including people like Questlove, Jacob Collier, Pink Sifu. There's a whole lot of different people in there. Overall, I'd describe it as probably an electronic pop album, but it also swings into some funk and some R&B as well, all in a modern sense, not the older sense of funk and R&B. And one of the things that really stood out to me as I listened to it was the unique use of different cadences within the music. What I mean by that is that occasionally Kimbra will choose to do something that's not quite what you expect. It's not done in a way that throws you off balance or makes it uncomfortable to listen to, but it's done in a beautiful way that keeps you engaged and interested. I kept finding myself wondering when there was going to be the next twist that I didn't see coming. Maybe a slightly longer phrase than I expected, or a pause between two words or phrases that was just different to what I expect, different to the norm, but still very enjoyable. What that does mean is that it's not a relaxing album as such. This isn't an album that I would put on in the background and let play away. Something like last month's album, Black Pumas, is much more of that. It's more of a background music vibe kind of album. This one is an album that I find demands my attention more. It's an album that I would put on to listen to, not to live my life to as much. And that could be good or bad depending on your tastes. In terms of production quality, it's a very cleanly produced album. Everything is crisp and clean, well placed within the mix. It's probably not an album that's going to become an audiophile staple, but it is one that I would comfortably use for testing and auditioning gear. In particular, one track which I'll get to in a second. And so let me run through a few standout tracks now to tell you what you might want to listen for and what I thought were some really interesting tracks on the album. The first one's actually the opening track called Save Me, and it's a really strong opening track in my opinion that grabbed my attention. It's got a little bit of a Radiohead meets Lana Del Rey kind of vibe to it, and I found it instantly fairly unique, fairly different, and as I said, quite engaging. But it also doesn't set the tone for the whole album. When you move on from that, everything else is a little bit different. Some of them are more upbeat, some go into a more traditional ballad style. And one of the next ones that stood out to me was The Way We Were. This is the one that I probably would use as a test track because it's got layers upon layers of texture and sound. It's not busy or overdone, but it's really interesting to listen to from a textural point of view. Moving on from that one, we've got the LA Type, or LA Type I should say. And this is the track that has the collaboration with Pink Sifu, Tommy Raps, Questlove and Jacob Collier. So plenty of different artists coming to this one, and it's quite a funky, cool track. While we're talking about some of those collaborations, I also want to ask what people think, what your awareness is of Jacob Collier. Do you know him beyond YouTube videos? Do you know his albums? I nearly chose one of his albums, or actually a series of albums, for the tune-up this month, and I decided not to because I thought maybe everybody already knew about him. But let me know in the comments down below. Are you really familiar with Jacob Collier? Do you know about his albums? Do you maybe only know him from YouTube, or maybe you've never heard of him? Let me know in the comments. But moving on, I want to talk about one more track from A Reckoning, and that's the final track on the album, which is called I Don't Want To. This is the track that I alluded to before, which is much more of a traditional ballad style track. But it's not boring, it's not cliche, it's still interesting, it's just a very different sound from so much else on the album. And that may make it sound like the album's a bit incoherent, but it's definitely not the case for me. There's somehow a thread of connectivity through all of these tracks that makes them interesting. They all belong together, but it's also a journey. It takes you through a whole series of different emotions, different feelings, different sounds, different textures, but they do all belong together. And so hopefully you'll check out A Reckoning by Kimbra. As I said, don't look at it as a relaxing kind of background music track, but put it on with a good system when you've got a bit of time to focus on it and see what you think. Let me know if you find it enjoyable like I did. But for now, let's jump onto the other album I looked at, and that was one that was just a general choice. So as I said before, I'm going to focus the tune-ups now on having one that's a brand new release, and another that is just something that I've found that I love of any age. And the one that I chose for this time is actually a relatively recent album. It's a 2021 release, and it's called The Golden Hour by Cory Wong and Dave Koz. If you're not familiar with those names, Cory Wong was a member of the band Wolfpack, and he's also got his own band now, Cory and the Wong Notes. He's been around for a while, a very cool, very funky guitarist. Pairing up with him is Dave Koz, who's quite well known as a saxophonist in sort of a smooth jazz kind of way. And if you just heard the word smooth jazz and you cringed a little bit, I totally get it. But I should also mention that this album kind of skirts the line between smooth jazz, but also being really funky and cool at the same time. At least I think so. Before I start talking about the album more, I do want to mention that it was produced by Cory Wong. And when we're talking production, the production quality again on this one is quite strong. Not quite probably audiophile staple level, and what I mean by that is it's not one of those albums you're likely to hear being played to death at hi-fi shows and in hi-fi shops, but it is one that I think is well enough produced that I'd test and audition gear with it happily. Coming back around now to the sound of the album and the music on the album, as I said, it's one of those albums that's almost cliche, it's almost a bit kitsch. It's got that touch of smooth jazz, which is a genre that I often run the other way from. But on this occasion, it doesn't get cliche or boring or in any way kind of insipid like I sometimes find smooth jazz to get. And in fact, it's actually got some great catchy tracks, and it's an album that I find myself coming back to over and over again because it's just enjoyable. Specifically, 3 standout tracks that I want to flag is the opening track, Today. This one's catchy, it's funky, it's quite cool. Then there's The Golden Hour, which is also incredibly catchy. This one's bordering into that sort of smooth jazz kitschness at times, but somehow they've kept it cool and funky. And speaking of that, I should mention, this album isn't mostly smooth jazzish. It's got a couple of tracks that are very funky. The second track on the album, I don't remember the name of it, but it's got sort of a 60s, 70s cop show funk vibe. It's quite cool and different. And so the album is definitely not a smooth jazz album in my opinion, but you can hear the influence there. The other standout track that I want to mention is Family Reunion, and the reason I want to mention that is for 2 reasons. One of them is that this is definitely the most kind of smooth jazz kind of feel. It's still funky, but it's funky in the same way that an 80s sitcom theme song was. This sounds like a really well written, recorded and played theme song from an 80s sitcom. And often all I can think of when I listen to it is what it would look like if it had people kind of popping up on screen doing day-to-day things and then smiling at the camera as their name pops up on screen. And so do be prepared for that, but also be prepared for the fact that it is insanely catchy, and unfortunately I find myself thoroughly enjoying it every time it comes on. And so if you're happy to delve into something that can be a little bit kitsch, it can be a little bit smooth jazz, maybe you love smooth jazz and that's great, just because I don't doesn't mean you shouldn't. So if that sounds okay to you, if it sounds good to you even, then I do reckon that The Golden Hour is worth checking out. I think it's an album that's lots of fun, very catchy, very easy to listen to. It's an album that you can put on in the background or you can sit down and really listen to. And so I'll wrap things up there. Hopefully I've introduced you to at least 1, maybe 2 albums that you're going to enjoy. As always, let me know in the comments down below how you find them. As a reminder, I'm not looking for suggestions for albums to listen to or to review in the tune-up, and that's purely because I just get overwhelmed. If I get 30, 40 comments listing 4 or 5 albums each, it's way too much for me to go through. So thank you for those that have suggested them on the previous tune-up. Thank you for those that might have already typed some in on this tune-up, but please don't be offended when I ignore them. Not because I'm not interested in finding new music, but because I've already got so much to sift through. So thanks again for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this one. Again, let me know if you liked this format of the tune-up better than the first month. And for now, let me leave it to the music. So happy listening. I hope you enjoy the albums, and I'll see you here next time on Passion for Sound.